Thanks so much, Nabia, and thank you very much to Jean and Vicky for inviting me to speak. As you said, some of us have a lot of experience. I've now retired 3 times from the federal public service, but was delighted to be involved last year on the Syrian Refugee Resettlement Initiative. And this fall, I've been traveling the country with Minister Carla Qualtrough, who's leading consultations about accessibility legislation for the Government of Canada. And it's been a great opportunity to reconnect with some of the people in the parts of the country where I've visited. So what I'm hoping to do today, when we had a conference call about this panel, Naomi said, had anybody been to a P2P session before? And we all said, no, we hadn't. So kudos to you for organizing something that's drawn out so many people. I wasn't exactly sure about the audience. I've now looked at the list. And clearly from the sessions I've been in today, people here have a lot of very intimate knowledge of the Syrian operation. But that's what I'm going to speak about. And I'll try to do it very quickly, and then I will have lots of time for questions. And as I said, I'll just do kind of an overview of the Government of Canada's plan, and then my personal reflections on what some of the success factors and the early lessons learned were for this initiative. When I think back to a year ago, when you had Minister McCallum yesterday talking about where we were a year ago, the government had a number of plans last fall. So there was the plan that was put in place during the election period after the death of Alan Kurdi and the mobilization of Canadian interest. And the Conservatives had a goal of bringing in, I think it was 16,000 over a 2-year period of time. No, it wasn't. It was more than that. We were going to be more than that. And then the Liberals got elected, and they said 25,000 by December 31st. And then November 24th, they came out with the plan of, by the end of February, 25,000, and a mix of government-assisted and privately sponsored refugees. So at this point last year, a number of the people from the resettlement organization and from some of the cities and provinces who are represented, a number of us met in Toronto right after the CCR meeting that Janet Dench hosted in Hamilton last year. And we talked about the plan, and we tried to share some of the information that we knew, because things were changing very quickly in terms of the issue of transportation loans, the issue of medical requirements, and what the changes were going to be to interim federal health programs. So the Government of Canada plan had its 5 phases. Phase 1, which was that identification of refugees. And for people who are working in the department in IRCC, that was a very significant goal to do that identification and then do the processing in the timelines that a new and ambitious government had laid out for us. Then there was a whole other issue around transportation. So I think at about this time last year, Chris Friesen was pushing the idea of cruise ships. That he thought would be a great idea. We could do all the settlement right on the cruise ships, having meetings with people in Ottawa. So there were questions: are people coming on planes? Are they coming on boats? Are they staying overseas? Are they going to bases? All of those kinds of things were very active at this time last year. The whole issue of the welcome to Canada, and then finally, settlement and integration. And always in the images on the department's website, you always saw this phase 5 settlement and integration as the big piece with the big maple leaf. And it was so hard to get anybody to talk about it inside the department because they were so focused on the processing and the transportation and the welcome and how many airports did we need and all of those kinds of things. So I'll go very, very quickly because I know we only have 12 minutes. There were a lot of new innovations during each of these phases. Minister McCallum spoke yesterday about the importance of trying to transfer some of the things that the department learned how to do quickly. Working with UNHCR was hugely important in terms of that identification, and they sent out these 60,000 text messages. But we were also dealing with some new programs. The government at that point didn't have a lot of experience with the blended visa officer referred cases. And during the, well, in January last year, the Syrian Family Links program was set up. Lots of questions about how the medical and security screening would be done. In terms of the decision that we weren't going with cruise ships and that we were going with flights, we were Air Transat, Air Canada, DND, many people donated flights, but most people were transported through chartered flights, and getting the schedule clear about how quickly we would be able to get exit permits and exit visas, and then communicating to Canadians about arrivals. And this was something, I look at Brian Dick at the back of the room, and I think it was maybe Christmas Eve that we finally kind of got a system of gnats getting out in notification of arrivals of transportation, getting out in any kind of reasonable time limit. Planning the welcome centers, and for those of you who had the opportunity to visit either the Toronto or Montreal flights, having a congregated system at Toronto and Pearson, at Toronto and in Montreal, where you could do the medical exams, where you could do the security screenings off the flights, where you could give out the winter clothing, where you could give out the social insurance cards. Refugees got a package of information about applying for things like the child tax benefit and all of that. It was terrific. And then the onward destining, so that continued to be an issue throughout. So now I'm going to challenge technology even more and see if we can run this little YouTube video. This is something that was put together by the Department of National Defense. They called their contribution to Syria Operation Provision. And this will give you a sense of what the scene was like overseas.
The most important thing is the education that his children will receive. He would think of the resettlement as a way forward for his children.
That all parts of the process. We are established in the 4 different locations of the process to continue participating in the success story.
Thank you, Canada.
Welcome aboard. Hello there.
What this really shows is the collaboration that happened overseas with National Defense, the Public Health Agency, IRCC, other government departments, Foreign Affairs, everybody working together. And that also happened in Ottawa with the Government Operations Center. And really the degree of collaboration amongst departments was really remarkable for those of us who were involved in that. So now you can see they're getting on the planes. So I think for me, when some of us gathered in April to do kind of early lessons learned, that ambitious timeline was hugely important to getting the momentum and the drive to do this, but we do recognize the implications of the pace and scale. And we were just in the next session talking about public support. Okay, I'm at the end. I'll do one last little closing thing. I think we were talking about how do you maintain this momentum to apply to different initiatives. And Louisa Taylor was saying what we really want to maintain is that sense of support for refugees and immigration. We don't need to keep on throwing people into hotels for weeks at a time and things like that. But we do want to maintain that sense that this was a moment that Canada stood up and we all worked together, and that was hugely important. So thank you.